Howl's Moving Castle. One of my absolute favorite movies from Studio Ghibli, with a fantastical and European aesthetic, a journey through love, destiny. It's a movie that for me always created a sense of peace and joy, and just who doesn't love their character design? I mean, look at Calcifer. But let's begin, shall we? For this project, the client requested a fusion between Sophie's and Howl's designs. And after a few tries, they ended up choosing this design, which revolved around mainly Sophie's character, with some of Howl's features, including items like his famous jacket. The second step that I'm showing is not something that I always make for myself, but after I've encountered a few issues with past projects, where I ended up sculpting the head, for example, bigger than I needed it to be, I just decided to draw and plan a bit more precisely each piece that I'm going to sculpt next by just drawing them in the real dimensions, so that I can keep it on the side while I'm sculpting and just check that I'm doing everything correctly for a change. To start sculpting the head of our doll, I first needed to create a structure using some layers of tin foil wrapped around a wooden stick. And I do like to spend some time on the structure to make it as symmetrical and even as possible, which will inevitably help me once I start sculpting. This is where, for example, the sketch that we've just made will come in handy, just to keep checking that we didn't put too many layers of tin foil and we're keeping the structures smaller than the draw. I also like to add a little jaw piece, if you will, just to work on the silhouette. This is how the structure looks like, and now it's time to sculpt. All crusty gloves, yay! I use epoxy clay for my dolls, which, if you've never used it before, is a type of clay that dries by itself and it comes separated in two, which will mix together in equal parts. Just please make sure to use gloves to combine them, and just in general, use gloves. It's just better that way. Safety first, guys. And now, I'm just gonna leave you to some great ASMR. Hand cream. I use it to prevent the clay from sticking to my gloves, and it also really helps to smooth the clay while sculpting. I know that some people use water for the same purpose, but it might depend on the brand of clay that you're using. And for me, it just works the best with the hand cream. I use this plastic tool to create the high sockets, and this little metal thingy that I'm pretty sure is used in nail art, but I could be wrong. But that I just find so useful. And I always end up sculpting just mainly using this tool. At this point of the process, the clay will begin to harden, but all I have left to do now is just to smooth any eventual lumps, and if I'm going to notice any other imperfection later on, I can simply just add some clay or sand it. I'm also not worried about sculpting the nose nor the mouth at this point, as I can simply add them afterwards. I left the head on the side to dry, and let's just talk about wires. For any part that I want to make posable and that I know it's going to be moved a lot, I use aluminum wire due to its resistance and malleability. And to create the braid, I simply cut a long piece, folded it in half, and then twisted it on itself. We're then just going to poke a little hole in the head and then press the wire in. What we're going to do next is to sculpt the back of the head with some epoxy clay, and that will just keep the wire in place. Now for the eyes. I'm not sure if I recommend you guys to make them directly with clay. I've seen other people using resin or glass eyes, but this is how I've been doing it so far. I'm gonna finish sculpting it off camera, but now let's talk about paint. I'll leave you guys the name of the brand that I use in the description down below if you're interested. I really like this paint. For the skin tone, I normally add a little bit of green or blue to my mix, it is simply to tone it down and make it a little bit more natural instead of having a vibrant pinkish color. And for darker skin tones, I add some purple or green depending on the doll that I'm working on. Now this is not the yarn that I ended up using for Sophie, but let's just pretend for a second that it is. What I'm doing right now is just making some swatches. And I also need to create a tone of gray to match the yarn that I picked for her hair, which is not the one that I've shown you so far. Now let's paint it up. The first layer of paint is kind of like a watered down version of my mixture, and I'm not really worried at this point with covering the clay completely, and more so just giving it a uniform layer of paint that will make the second layer grip more easily. If you feel like you have some problems with your brush strokes being too visible and noticeable, try to work with 3 to 4 thin layers of paint instead of 1 thick layer of paint. And believe me, I learned that the hard way. Patience is key. And I'll leave you guys with more of the painting process. To create this purple shade for the feathers, I've simply taken some of the mixture that I made for her skin and added some purple to it. This will help the feathers to match the face more. This was by far the best part of the process. I just felt like her face was starting to make sense and looking more and more like what I've envisioned. Since I'm going to attach some feathers on her chest and her shoulders, I've also decided to paint some of them on the neck. On the neck. I decided to also paint some on her neck. And let's add some more details and shadows to really make these feathers pop. Now the head is complete. Look at that. And now we're going to start working on her braid. This is the yarn that I was supposed to show you before, and it's a slightly darker tone of gray that I will leave you guys in the description as well. Now I've tried to braid the yarn directly to the wire, but it just didn't work out, so I ended up just cutting some strings and wrapping them around it instead. I then loosen up the yarn a little bit at the end of the braid just to make it look closer to what a natural hair texture will look like. Just so fluffy. The jacket. I've quilted a couple of pieces before, but nothing came even close to this little jacket nightmare. If some of you guys saw regularly or like daily, I'm sure that you could have done this way faster, but it was a struggle for me. With my sewing machine, I just kept sewing them together just to create a big enough piece of fabric to fit my pattern for the front of the jacket. These will be the front pieces, and this is the back. And yes, the back is wrong. It's not supposed to be pink. Yay! After making the client aware of my huge mistake, they were very kind and just told me to leave it like it was. I really appreciated it. But me and Zach is probably like deeply disappointed. Not that he cares, but if he cared, he would be deeply disappointed. I ended up sewing most of the parts by hand, especially the sleeves, just because I feel like they're very small and it's kind of hard to use the machine. And here's the jacket, finally done. Now let's paint together the other shoe. As we did for the face, we start with a watery base just to spread it out evenly. A little hack: if you don't want to wait for each layer to dry by itself, just use a hair dryer in between to just give it a little shush to save yourself some precious time. I painted the shadow of the shoe, which I think it's called tongue of the shoe, before applying the last couple of coats of brown on the rest of the shoe. As for the darker shadow details, I rarely use black. I find that using instead like a very dark red or dark purple or dark brown in this case were better to just give it like some three-dimensional feels to it. I then coated both shoes with epoxy resin and left them out to dry for about 24 hours. For her dress, I ended up making a new pattern that was going to look as close as possible to the original design. These cuts on the pattern for the skirt simply refer to where I'll pinch and sew the fabric to create the folds that will make the dress look puffy. And I chose these two fabrics for the skirt. This is a marker that I always use to trace all my patterns. I didn't make the dress removable, and I normally don't make them removable unless the client requests it. And so I had to dress it up before attaching the head, as with the head in place, the neck hole would just be too small to pass the head through. So I'm just, struggling to put this dress up. Okay, so it's time to apply the feathers that I've already prepared. I used two types of fabrics, a soft velvet fabric and a blue acrylic felt. I needed to stiffen the fabrics, and so I found a YouTube tutorial that was very simple. All I had to do was just prepare in a bowl a mixture of warm water and white glue, immerse my fabrics, and then put them out to dry for about 24 hours. The next day, I just cut each feather and added some details and highlights with my paintbrush and some white and blue acrylic paint. Now I'm just going to choose exactly where to place my feathers using some pins. At first, I considered attaching them all with hot glue, but I ended up sewing the bottom row first and waiting to attach the top row just after I attached the head, which we're going to attach using this glue. Just put in a good amount in there. We were going to just press the wooden stick that I left attached to the head inside of her body, and that would just keep it in place. And I can't believe that I'm saying this, but she is done. I really love being able to work on this idea, and I couldn't be happier with the way that she turned out. Thank you so much for watching. Like and subscribe if you want to, and I'm gonna go rewatch the movie. And you should too.